The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to photographer Rick Smolan. He just published Inside Tracks, a massive collection of images he shot of Robyn Davidson's amazing adventure crossing the Australian Outback in the early 1980s. Her story was adapted as Tracks, a feature film starring actress Mia Wasikowska. Stick around. The part of Rick Smolan may be played by Adam Driver. Or not. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, brought to you today by Amazon.com. When you visit MrMedia.com and click on any of the links to purchase books, music, movies, gift certificates, or anything else through our Amazon link, you support this free video podcast. Whenever you need something else from Amazon, please consider returning to MrMedia.com to order it. It doesn't cost you any extra, and we sure appreciate the support. And don't forget, MrMedia.com has more than 1,200 celebrity audio and video interviews archived on the site. That's hundreds upon hundreds of hours free entertainment. Subscribe for free on MrMedia.com, and you'll instantly get an email every time a new interview is posted. You can also watch and subscribe to the show on YouTube, Vimeo, Dailymotion, the Realm Network, and Frequency.com. And if you prefer to just listen, Mr. Media is also available for free on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Blueberry, TuneIn, Blog Talk Radio, Podfeed.net, and Player FM. You can subscribe to any of those services and never miss another episode. Finally, you can interact with Mr. Media Interviews on all kinds of social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and more. Friend or follow us, we'll friend or follow you back. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of slow-moving camels whose humps store only craft beer in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Rick Smolan started his career as a photographer, but one unlike most others in his field. He thinks big, really, really big. One day, Smolan unleashed an entire army of photographers, amateurs and pros alike, on a single country to capture a day in its life. He eventually published an entire series of coffee table books with day-in-a-life images from around the globe. Then, another idea. Let's attack a theme. His most recent, the human face of big data. But before he became known for his massive reach, and recognizable by his mustache and, sorry Rick, goofy grin, Smolan was a Time, Life, and National Geographic magazine photographer, one who found himself in a grand bargain. An ambitious young Australian woman named Robyn Davidson had asked the Geographic Society to fund her planned journey across 900 kilometers of the Australian Outback in exchange for writing a first-person story about her trip. Nat Geo turned her down. Undaunted, she appeared in the editor's mailbox a second time, a year later, to again ask for their help and $4,000. This time, the answer was yes, but it came with a tall string. The magazine wanted to send photographer Smolan to capture her travels on film at different points along the way. Amid grave hesitation, she agreed, although she never let Smolan forget he was helicoptering in and not fully engaged in her mind. The spectacular new book, Inside Tracks, is the photographer's view. Open it and you won't be able to take your eyes off it. This, by the way, is Smolan's second appearance on Mr. Media. And Rick Smolan, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here, Bob. Thank you.
Did I get anything wrong so far?
No, it's pretty accurate so far.
All right. I'm sure I'll start messing it up at any time now. But
Yeah.
It's good to have you back. So let's start with the important stuff. You get a call saying that the creepy dude from Lena Dunham's HBO series Girlfriends is going to play you in a movie. Do you call your lawyer and demand a do-over?
It's funny, I had never seen Girls when they told me that they'd cast Adam. And I went and watched one of the shows, and it it was pretty bizarre to see somebody who you know is going to be playing you on the screen. I mean, usually if this happens at all, and it usually happens when you're not alive anymore, or you've done something so notorious that it's holding you up for ridicule. Adam was incredibly. It was wonderful to work with. I met with him in New York City before he went down to Australia to play me in the movie. And he admitted he'd never actually held a 35 millimeter camera before. He said, I've taken pictures with my iPhone. So he wanted someone to spend a day with him, sort of showing him how to hold the camera, how to change a roll of film, how to look like he actually was a photojournalist. And he came across very well in the film, I thought.
It's amazing, though. I mean, you saw Girlfriends, and you had to be thinking, oh, my God, this guy? Really? What did I do wrong to somebody in Hollywood? I mean, but now, of course...
He's the guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy. He's in the new Star Wars movie. It's like you'd be able to say, that guy in Star Wars. Yeah, he played me.
Yeah, he's got to start playing me.
That's right. And so, what is it actually like seeing yourself portrayed on film?
My brother's a director, and he said, "Look, there's this thing called the arc of the character, where they have to." Most people in their lives don't actually change very much, and so the reason we all enjoy movies is when you see somebody starts here and they end up over here. So my brother said, without even seeing the screenplay, he said, look, you're probably going to be like the jerk at the beginning of the movie, and then hopefully by the end, you'll get better. And the first time I saw the movie, I was sort of appalled because they definitely did exactly what my brother had said they were going to do. And sort of, played the paparazzi, parasite, photojournalist, feeding off of other people. And then, by the end, I'm redeemed. And I tried, I spent a lot of time speaking with the director and with the filmmaker, just saying, look, whenever you see a photographer in a movie, it's always this amalgam of a paparazzi, war photographer, fashion photographer, photojournalist, because you have a camera around your neck, therefore they're all interchangeable. And I said, photojournalists would never set up a picture. It'd be like a New York Times writer fabricating a quote. So, of course, the first scene they have is of me directing her at Ayers Rock. Turn left, turn right, put your head back. But, the one thing they did tell me, which I think they were right about, they said every time Adam's on the screen, the audience melts. He's got this sort of wonderful charisma that people just love, especially women. Even when he was obnoxious, even when I was embarrassed thinking, oh my God, there's somebody playing me doing that, I would never do that. Everybody I spoke to afterwards said, oh, Adam was so great in that role. So, I saw it by myself the first time and was a little dismayed. But when I saw it with Robyn and with Mia and with my niece and some friends and watch everybody else react, I thought, okay, the movie works. And that's all that's important.
He was actually the reason during the first season of Girlfriends that I stopped watching it with my wife. I've just found the character just so distasteful. I just didn't want anything to do with it. But then over the summer, I guess, or early fall, there was a movie with Tina Fey and Jason Bateman and a whole bunch of well-known actors, and there he is. And I thought, oh God, here we go again. But yeah, I mean, he's very charismatic. You can't deny it. He's a charming guy, and he's very good on screen.
It's actually funny, when I went on set, I was there for the week there at Ayers Rock, and I now regret this, but my niece who came with me ran to the top of Ayers Rock. This is a 5 mile. It's the biggest rock in the world, and it takes several hours to climb it. There's a chain link fence you pull yourself up on. He literally ran up the side of the rock. She said it was just amazing. I was too tired. I was so jet lagged. But he's a very engaging guy, very intense, very sweet, doesn't like all the Hollywood crap, hates Instagram and Facebook and social media. He just wants to act. That's what he wants to do. Anyway, it was an honor.
I'm sorry. I just got a text from Adam. What were you saying about him not liking social media and all that stuff? I've got him right here on...
must be somebody playing him.
All right, so one more question about that.
Yeah.
We'll let the Adam Driver question go. So I asked you what it was like to see someone playing you on screen. What about the part where Adam Driver gets the girl in your stead? I mean, there you are watching this guy playing you 30 years ago, and having a night of passion with a lovely young actress. I mean, it's got to be a little weird.
Well, I was pretty smitten with Robyn. And in fact, they played down the romance in the movie, which I think is actually good because I think that the movie's about this young woman listening to her own inner voice, learning to survive through her own wits, risking her life. It's sort of, there's a mystery. I always tell people that that the story of Inside Tracks, this new book and the movie, is sort of a love story, a dog story, a mystery of why she's out there, and an epic adventure. I think most of us spend our lives avoiding the things that frighten us, which is a pretty good survival, instinct. But Robyn, I think, was the only person I've ever met in my life that feels like she needs to go towards the things that frighten her to see if they're really worthy of spending your whole life sort of as a negative center of gravity. It sounds sort of, everybody's always wondered why would this young woman set off alone, no GPS, no cell phones, no satellites, no internet, and no one to rescue her. She got in trouble. She ran out of water. She got attacked by herds of wild camels. She got adopted by the Aborigines. But she's never told anybody why she did the trip, even though I spent 3 months traveling with her.
Well, I was going to ask you if you've come to some conclusion about that, or if you ever got that out of her.
Well, I think it was really that sense of just listening to your own voice. I mean, I think Robyn is one of these people that's more comfortable by herself than she is with people. She loves animals. We had the most interesting conversations out there. So this woman's walking 20 miles a day. She's got 4 camels and her trusty dog, Diggity. There's an interesting backstory to Diggity, her dog. This dog was, first of all, it's the first dog I ever fell in love with, which Robyn resented terribly that Diggity liked me at the beginning. But Robyn told me that 2 years before her trip, she'd gotten a job as a janitor in a hospital when she was about 24 years old. Just, odd job to earn some money. And one night she heard these terrible cries coming from the basement. And she went downstairs and found there was a room where they were taking stray dogs and doing terrible experiments on them. And she couldn't stand it. So she waited till everyone else left that night and then opened all the cages and all the doors, let all the animals out. And there was a little puppy that had been brought in that day that nothing had been done to yet. And the puppy didn't run away, it just stood there by her feet, and that became her dog, Diggity. And Diggity saved her life so many times during the trip. The movie, by the way, is just now sort of, it's still in a few theaters across the United States, but it's gotten just tremendous acclaim. Front page of the Wall Street Journal, 5 stars from everybody, 6 pages of Entertainment Weekly. So I'm really happy that Robyn's story was told in such a beautiful way by the guys that made the King's Speech.
And I'm sure you're eager to see, as we're entering awards season, how it holds up.
Yeah, well, Mia was nominated for Best Actress for the Gotham Awards, which were announced last Monday. And unfortunately, she didn't win, but she lost to Julianne Moore, right, who played her mother in The Kids Are All Right. So I sent her a note and said, well, if you had to lose anybody, losing to your mother, not as bad as it could have been.
No, and that was a very good movie too.
Yeah,
The Kids Were All Right.
Yeah.
Going back in time. The question that I had for you, the biggest question I had for you in reading the book and the pictures and trying to understand the whole thing is, how did you? I mean, she's walking or riding, mostly walking, I guess, with the 4 camels and the dog Diggity. Across the Outback, 20 kilometers, 32 kilometers, 20 miles a day, I guess is the...
Yeah, right? Pretty much, yeah.
How do you pick up with her and leave and then come back? I mean, are you walking? It doesn't make sense to me.
It's a great question. Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, I have no sense of direction whatsoever.
Assignment then.
Yeah, I was like the perfect person for this. My friend said, "You're the one that's going to die out there, not her." I could barely change the tires of my car. I'm a New York City kid. I wasn't even a Boy Scout. So what we worked out is basically, if she's walking 20 miles a day, and I would leave, and so I would figure, okay, in about 6 weeks, if you're walking 20 miles a day, you should be at about this Aboriginal mission or this cattle station. So I would drive ahead of her, 400 or 500 miles. And then leave my car there, and then go out on a mail plane. They have mail planes that come in to bring supplies, food, petrol, things like that. And then when I came back, she would have been alone for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, not seeing a single human being. And it never took me, not once, did it ever take me more than 24 hours to find her. And the Aborigines always knew where she was. As long as I could find an Aboriginal settlement, I would say, "Have you seen the camel lady?" And they could take me right to her. And she was always amazed. She said, "How did you ever find me out here?" And I said, "You may think you're alone, but they're tracking you. They know exactly where you are the whole time." It was quite fascinating.
To me, I mean, her trip was amazing, but being a journalist myself, I mean, that's the part that I wanted to know. Is like, how do you keep finding her? Because, I mean, yeah, there's no I mean, this is like what, 1983?
No, 77 actually.
77. Oh, it was even further back. I'm sorry.
Even further back. No,
my math was off. I apologize.
It was a long. I was 28 years old. Emotionally, I was like 19. Every girlfriend I had at that point, it lasted a week, and then I get an assignment. It's like, we'll work this out when I come back, and I would never come back because I'd go off to some other country. I was incredibly lucky. I never studied photography. I did the yearbook in high school and college, and I got hired by Time magazine when I was 24. Never having had a job. I mean, I was doing little freelance jobs, but there was a guy at Time named John Derniak who had this, I didn't know at the time, but I found out later, he had this reputation of looking for one young, hungry photographer and throwing them out in the middle of the lake to see if they would sink or swim. And I didn't know that I was, that guy that year. And I'm an adrenaline junkie, Bob. I don't know what you're like, but when I'm scared, I'm much better. And when I'm complacent, I always screw up. When I feel like, oh my God, that's when I actually do my best work. So,
well, since I was just thinking as you were describing sort of your background, I was thinking of I like to. There's two groups of professionals I like to have on the show. I like to have comedians because they're very challenging to talk to, and photographers because it's always interesting to get inside their head. And most of the photographers who've been on, there've been some really great photographers. Almost to a one, they've indicated that they never trained professionally. They kind of got thrown into it, or they stepped into it, or they met somebody, or they, it's really interesting. I mean, because you have to be pretty smart. You have to be pretty alert. You have to be able to interpret the world through your eyes, and that becomes, you somehow, without a sense of direction, you manage to survive. I would have thought the scariest part is getting on those mail planes. That would have freaked me out more than anything else.
Part of it is just total naivete about when you're that age, when you're 28 years old, you kind of think you're invulnerable. I've always said that photojournalism is the world's finest form of delayed adolescence. Because the wonderful thing about a lot of photographers is they're very childlike. They're your best friend while they're in front of you, and then a minute later, there's somebody else's best friend. I often think
true, folks. It is so true. Yeah.
So much also being a photographer is, it's not even taking the best pictures, but it's talking your way past the palace guard to take the picture. So it's really people skills, but sometimes, at least at the beginning of your career, at least, a lot of it is getting into the editor's office, getting into the palace, and getting past the guards. Basically, it's like being a benevolent con man in a way. You're not doing something to somebody, but you need to kind of get them to go along, to see things from your perspective. So, and that did not happen with Robyn. Robyn felt like she'd sold her soul to the devil, and I represented the devil she sold her soul to. So it was pretty tense at the beginning of the trip. I said to her, if you don't want me out here, give them back the money, but don't get angry at me. You asked me, for help. She used my name to write to National Geographic and said, now you're angry at me that I'm out here. It's like, you can't have it both ways. We also, you'd probably relate to this too. Her feeling was that my taking pictures of Aborigines was being parasitic. It said, you people come out here, you take pictures of these poor people and get paid to do it. And they said, look, if this is a contest about who cares the most about Aborigines, you win, because I just got here and I'm learning about this. But your caring about them is wonderful, but if my picture's on the cover of National Geographic and, 40 million people around the world see what your countrymen have done to these poor people and to their culture, maybe I might have a little more influence, or maybe I could help a little bit more than you just feel, being sympathetic or want. Robyn wasn't out there to learn about Aborigines. She wanted to learn from them. It's one of the things I really admire too. She took language tapes. She felt that they had a lot to offer her, as opposed to the reason most people spend time with the Aborigines, which is to study them as this, in an anthropological way. very interesting. Just her whole attitude towards life is unlike anything I'd ever experienced before.
So you knew her before she reached out to the Geographic. I think I missed that detail.
She was washing the windows of my hotel when Time magazine sent me to do a cover story on Aborigines. So I actually showed up in Alice Springs, as she said, another parasite coming here to take advantage of our Aborigines. And I took a picture of her and she got really angry. And that night I went to a dinner with a group of social workers that were working with Aborigines, and one of whom had taken me into the camps and gotten me permission to photograph. And the party ended up being at this woman's house, the one who'd yelled at me during the day. So it was very tense at the beginning. I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the conversations. I would show up about every 6 weeks, and the first time I came out there, she said, you Americans treat friendship like Valium. It's like the insult of the day. I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, well, every time I see Americans together, you're all saying, don't worry, it'll work out, everything will be fine. And I said, and that's a bad thing. And she said, yeah, because if you care about somebody, if someone's your friend and they're, marrying the wrong person, have an abusive boss, or doing something, dangerous to their lives, you hit them over the head with a 2x4. You risk your friendship to be a friend. You may lose the friendship by being brutally honest. And she said, you're like cowards. Like, you'll never risk your friendship to actually help each other. And I thought, well, first of all, that's a pretty damning statement of all Americans. But I thought, okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'd never thought about that, and maybe there's some validity to that. The second time I came out, I was buzzing about some cover story I just shot for Time magazine, because in between of traveling with Robyn, I'd go off and shoot other stories. And about 15 minutes after we started talking, she said, you know what? She said, when are you going to get here? I said, excuse me? And she said, when are you going to get here? And I said, I'm sitting right across from you. She said, no, you're not. She, since the moment you drove up here, you've been talking about your cover story for Time in Taiwan, and where you're going to leave the car in 2 weeks when you leave me. And it's like you're in front of me, and you're either thinking about something that happened 3 weeks ago or something's going to happen in 2 weeks. And if you're going to come out here, goddammit, then be here with me and don't be lost in your head the whole time. And now when I'm sitting in a restaurant, and I'm sure you experience this too, you see all these couples, and they're sitting there with their phones and tablets, and they're with everybody except the person they're sitting with. And the whole world's now gone to that point where we're like mentally never where we are. And I mean, there's so many things that I learned from her back then that I see now reflected in society.
And that was the exchange that really caught my attention, is that she picked up on. Now, I wasn't thinking about it in terms of there was some personal stuff going on between the two of you. I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, if I'm on assignment, a lot of times I'm thinking about the last assignment or the next one. I'm thinking about logistics. I'm focused on the person. I'm trying to get their story. I'm not photographing, but I could see, it would be very interesting. It'd be very hard for you to come in, maybe you shot, the president of Singapore. I don't know. I'm just making something up.
No, it was the Prime Minister of Singapore. That's exactly what I just shot. Yeah.
It must be because it's fresh in my mind that I just read that. I wasn't okay. So I just reached out of my, and so it's like, yeah, it's very exciting. It's very, but yeah, it's like suddenly there's only two of you, and she hasn't spoken to a human being in 4 to 6 weeks. And you're going on about this, and even when you're not
Mr.
talking
Speedy,
about it,
right? Yeah,
it's still in your head, and so yeah, it's interesting.
It's that sense of being in the moment, which so few of us ever are, right? And I kept saying to her, "You've got to keep a journal. You should write. You should keep a little journal and write down the things that stand out for you, throughout the trip." And she said, well, "Why do you have to turn everything into a product? Why can't you just experience things and not always be packaging it and marketing it?" And so, of course, 2 years after the trip, because she did survive, thank goodness, she called me up one day and said, I've written a book about my trip called Tracks. And I said, do you want my journals? Because, in addition to photographing, I'd been writing everything down in my little notebooks. And she said, no, I think I managed to retell the story. And she said, I want you to read it because I'm not very kind to you in the book. Okay, so I read the book, and at the beginning I'm a jerk, and then I get better. It was fine, and I said, but the thing that amazed me so much about Tracks, her book, which is now sold 1 million copies in 18 languages, it's like a cult book around the world, is that most of us have sedimentary layer memories, where whatever happened yesterday is pretty clear, but then, 3 weeks ago is a little less clear, and then 3 years ago is like, I remember a little bit of what happened. She managed to recreate that trip literally moment by moment, day by day. She could completely replicate conversations we had verbatim. She could describe the sound that the wind made in the trees on the third night, that when it was a full moon. I said, how did you do that? And she said, because I was there every moment. I was paying attention. You were so busy recording it, you were never there. It was really interesting, different. She also has a photographic memory, which doesn't hurt too much. But it's a wonderful book. I love her book Tracks.
I got to go back to something. When I was teasing you about Adam Driver before. You said that despite like the scene of the Mia and Adam having a passionate night, that the movie played down the romance. Some of the things that you describe in terms of your interplay with her, it does sound like a boyfriend girlfriend at times. That emotional disconnect that we all have sometimes. How much of that was going on as you came and went?
Well, one of the things that was difficult about the trip was that Robyn didn't wear clothes a lot. So, and this sounds like a good thing.
Define difficult.
I could have used other words, but I'll use difficult. But first of all, I didn't want to send pictures of her naked back to National Geographic for a number of reasons. One is I didn't want them to think what was going on was going on. I also didn't want to send pictures of her back there because they were never going to use them. And I sort of thought of these guys in suits back in Washington. Whatever. So if you work for National Geographic, the rule is you have to send all your, back then, film. You can't develop your own film and edit it. You have to send them everything. And of course, I didn't feel comfortable doing that, so I'd go back to Melbourne or Sydney. I would develop the film at Kodak, in a lab. Nobody would look at it. And then I would edit it and only show them what I wanted them to see. And they were furious because, first of all, I'm 28 years old. It's my first assignment. It's just the opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm committing professional suicide. And the first time they said, we don't think you understand the rules here. You signed a contract with us. You have to see all your film. And I said, I wanted to make sure there wasn't dust in the camera, and I was worried about the film stock. And then by the third time, I still wasn't playing by the rules. They were getting pretty pissed off. But then when the story came out, it was such a big success, everybody kind of forgot about it, and nobody cared. But probably from about a third of the trip on, we were pretty close. And my biggest worry is every time I left Robyn, and I didn't want to leave. I mean, every time, the more attached I was to her, the more terrified I was something was going to happen to her. And I remember, and she wanted to be alone. The whole point of this trip wasn't have a boyfriend or anybody along at all. So, and I had to go off and do other assignments. But I would look in the rearview mirror of my car as I drove away, and I would watch her and think, would this be my last memory of her? Would she die out there? And the last time I would see her alive would be looking in as I drove away in my rearview mirror. And one day, about 3/4 of the way through the trip, I was in Hong Kong doing another story for Time, and I met the writer at the Hilton Hotel for breakfast, and I came in, and all my friends knew I was shooting the story about Robyn in between because it was pretty fascinating to people. And I walked into the hotel restaurant, and Richard Bernstein, he was then the youngest bureau chief of Time magazine. He looked very pale, and he said, "You better sit down." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Just sit down." And he hands me the local English language paper, and the headline says, "Mysterious Camel Lady Missing in Gibson Desert, Desperate Search Underway." And I just had a heart attack. I thought, oh my God, it's happened. This is like the thing I've been the most frightened of. And I don't even remember how I got to the airport. The next thing I remember was waking up in Darwin when they refueled the plane. And they brought all the morning papers from all over Australia onto the plane. And every single paper had my photographs, huge blow-ups that the National Geographic had given out. So I assumed she must be dead because the story hadn't been published in the magazine yet, so why would they give out my photographs? And I flew out to where I thought she would be, to a small town. There were 80 photographers, film crews, everyone looking for the Camel Lady. And, I had an idea of where she would be if she was alive. So I got a car. I got my car, which I'd left in that area. I drove to where I thought she'd be, and there she was. I knew nothing about this. She was never lost. And of course, before I can say a word, these guys are jumping out of their cars. I just led all these photographers and paparazzi right to her, and they're thrusting these newspapers in her face with my photographs. And she knew I had taken these pictures. So, my biggest worry, Bob, was throughout the whole trip was, I was worried that she thought my loyalties were to my career or to National Geographic and not to her. And here, before I can say a word, these people are thrusting these newspapers in her face, which looks like I've sold her out. And I finally got her away from everybody else and got them to all sort of give us some space. And we were trying to figure out what happened. I said, look, I didn't give the pictures to these people. I thought you were dead. I said, these stories have been running everywhere. And she said, I was never lost. I have no idea what this is about. We figured out what it was. A guy had decided to break the world's record of driving from one side of Australia to the other in a racing car. He had this racing car with big fat tires. And she said in the middle of the night, her dog starts barking, the camels get up, and this guy screeches up in this racing car, hits on her. She tells him to piss off. He gets to Sydney, he breaks the world's record, and one of the journalists in Sydney says, what was the most memorable part of your journey as you broke the world's record? And he said, I spent a romantic night in the moonlight with a naked camel lady. So they made up the story of her being missing. The part I didn't understand is why would the Geographic have given my pictures out? And it turns out it was the middle of summer. Some very entrepreneurial, enterprising young paparazzi had called up, and there was a guy in the mailroom. Everybody was away for like 2 weeks. And this guy somehow had convinced this guy to go into the files and find my photograph saying that this woman was missing and they needed pictures to identify her. So anyway, it almost ruined the whole trip. And there were so many things like this where my heart was in my mouth, where I thought, oh my God, the woman I'm in love with has died,
Well, all right, so let's come back. There's a couple of journalistic issues at play here. When we started talking, you kind of impugned filmmakers' motives, but because of the narrative arc, they always start with the photographer is a jerk and he does terrible things, and then he has to kind of redeem himself throughout the way. Well, there's also this journalistic trope, if you will, about you don't get involved with the people that you're covering. You kind of left that out when you were attacking the filmmakers. And then, of course, at the part you were just describing, we have that other little journalistic trope where somehow journalists managed to make up stories. Not you, but these guys who were covering her. So there's a couple points along the way where
first of all,
journalism goes astray.
I wouldn't call them journalists, the ones that made stories.
Fair. That's fair.
Okay.
But what about the fact that you got involved with someone that you were covering, and covering like over a long period of time?
Well, I was going to say, I can think of a Woody Allen quote, but I'm not sure it's the right one. The heart wants what the heart wants. But that was pretty inappropriate. It's nice to say that you are always going to stay outside the story. If anything, most of my life I've been accused of being the outsider looking in and not getting involved. I was painfully shy as a kid, and a lot of my photographer friends also say that the camera was the first way they were able to talk to anybody, and girls in particular, for the male photographers. Or the females, whatever. When I was a kid, I felt like everybody else was born with something in their toolkit as a human being that taught them how to talk to other people, and I didn't have it. I was a ham radio operator and did Morse code, but I would basically always be by myself. And when my dad gave me a camera at 14, suddenly I had a reason to go up and talk to people. So I could go from the jocks to the nerds to the freaks to the sorority girls, whatever it was, and everybody wanted me there because I made them look good. But I think at the end of Robyn's trip, we'd been very close for a very long time. She was, Robyn was always challenging herself, but she was also always poking me. And I remember, like, the very last day of the trip, she gets to the ocean, she's made it, we're sitting by the fire at night talking about what's going to happen in the future. We're going to go to the Geographic, she's going to work on her story. And she said, so are you going back to being a prostitute now? And I said, what? I said, really? Really? We're still there? And she said, no, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, okay, what's the good part of, are you still going to be a prostitute? She said, no. She said, I feel like until my story, somebody would call you and say, okay, care about Aborigines this week. Next week, care about Taiwan. Next week, care about the typhoon that hit Guam. She said, I feel like my trip is the first that this has been the first time you cared about something that wasn't because someone was paying you to care. And she said, my question to you is, you're going back to waiting for someone else to wind you up, or are you going to use your, skills, such as they are, to to try to affect a situation, not just always be documenting it. So if anyone in your audience is interested and they want to see what happened after, how I responded to that challenge, if they go to www.natashastory.com, I won't tell you the story, but it's a story that I did for the next year, where I was trying to change the situation, which I felt was very unjust.
And I think it's interesting, the work that you've done in more recent years, the Day in the Life books, the human face of big data. I mean, you could look at it and say, okay, well, you're doing stuff where you're outside looking in, but just the attention, I think, that you bring to these things over the years, these different projects. I mean, you can't. Me as an observer of this, you have to have an emotional involvement in this. You can't just.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, look,
it's not just commerce to you, I don't think.
I think it's impossible as a journalist to not take sides. You have to have, you have to either agree or disagree with what you're seeing in front of you. And more and more, I guess it's advocacy journalism. I mean, I want to find things where I'm not just outside documenting, but where I can actually hope that by exposing something or shocking people or educating people or just making them think, that I've been able to sort of elevate the conversation, so it's not just the Twitter 140 characters that everything's now being kind of dumbed down to,
Well, before we wrap up, I promised we'd take a minute. Talk about the app that goes with the book a little bit.
Sure. The Harry Potter movies, where in the newspaper you can go and sort of tap on somebody in the newspaper and they turn around and talk to you.
Right.
So I found out that HP has this really cool app called Erasma. And so throughout this big, beautiful coffee table book, and it's like 30 inches wide when it's open, beautifully printed, 6-color printing, blah, 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 you can point at 20 different pictures that I shot of the original of Robyn's trip, and it immediately takes you and plays on our smartphone or tablet that scene in the movie. It's really delightful, and you see how the filmmakers took my still photographs and they cast the actors, they manufactured the same clothes we were wearing, they built the sets. I had no idea they were doing this, and I loved it. It was so exciting. And so it's a really delightful sort of, if you're looking for like a great gift for somebody for Christmas, hint, hint, I self-published this book because no publisher would agree to 6-color printing and spot varnish and blah, 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 and all the technology. And Amazon selling it for like $27, which I love. I mean, I wish they would give it away. I mean, you know what it's like as somebody that creates something. You want people to see something that you've created. But I also think Robyn's story is so inspiring. Robyn has this belief that an ordinary person is capable of anything. She doesn't describe herself as some kind of heroine. She just thinks that most of us, again, spend our lives like it's like a negative center of gravity. And I think you read this book and you think, wow, if she can do that, I can live out my dream,
we should. Well, actually, two things I want to end with. One is, I thought it was interesting when I got to the end of the book and I realized that the cover photo is actually from the end of the book, as opposed to That was just interesting. I just wanted to comment. I didn't really have a question there. But the last thing I wanted to ask you is, tell folks what Robyn is doing today, and are you still in contact with her? Yeah,
we're very good friends. It was actually really fun when the movie came out and going on tour together in Australia and going do Q&As with the audience. The funniest one was a woman came up to her at the end. The very last scene in the movie, she dives underwater. Mia dives underwater, and it's really this beautiful scene. And so this woman comes up to Robyn at the end of one of the screenings and says, "So, at the end of the movie, when you dive underwater, is that you committing suicide?" And Robyn said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "So is that what happens at the end? You commit suicide?" Robyn's sitting there going, yeah, that was me committing. It's like, hello, you just watched a movie about a real person.
What the fuck?
It's totally wacky, the things that people say. So Robyn, after Tracks was over, she went to India for a year, did another camel trip, living with nomadic camel herders. A friend of mine, Dilip Mehta, a wonderful photographer, actually photographed that trip. And she fell in love with an Indian prince, and she lived with him for about 15 years. And then he unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago, and she just moved back to Sydney. But her book Tracks is now required reading in Australian high schools like Catcher in the Rye was for us. There's actually courses taught about it. And actually, if any of your listeners are interested, if they write to you and you pass it on to me, there's actually a book club companion that comes with Tracks. It's a great discussion thing if you're in a book club or you've got kids that are interested in learning about what was it like to survive in the Outback for 9 months.
Oh, sure. Be happy to share that. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, folks, listen. You can find Inside Tracks, photographer Rick Smolan's extraordinary photographic record of Robyn Davidson's bold journey. A lot of adjectives there. I'm trying to help out here, Rick. As well as Robyn's original book, Tracks, and the feature film based on it, in great stores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. And if you're watching this video on mrmedia.com, you probably know how this works. To the left or to the right, maybe that's the right, maybe that's the left, depending on how you're looking at it, is the cover of the book. Very simple. You can click on it right this minute. It'll take you to Amazon. You can order the book. They can get it to you in 30 minutes or less with a drone, or you can get it. I don't know if that's true. Or you can have it sent to you more traditional ways within a day or two. It really is a spectacular-looking book. Rick has gone all out. He's done a lot of these big books over the years, but this is just gorgeous. I mean, and between the pictures of Robyn and Mia, who have an extraordinary resemblance. Maybe that's because Mia. Just she's a chameleon that way. I don't know, but the book is in sections. You go see it. Pick up the book. You'll enjoy it. Is there a website for the book, Rick?
Yeah, it's InsideTracksBook.com.
Where do you get these titles? I don't know. And can people find you and or the book on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all those places that Adam Driver is not? Yeah,
just search for Rick Smolan. So at Rick Smolan, and on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. It's just Rick Smolan, RickSmolan. I'm happy to talk.
That's correct. He did spell it correctly, folks.
Yay.
Well, Rick, it was great to see you. Great to have you back. Oh, and I should tell people, if you want to hear Rick's original interview on Mr. Media, it'll be on the Mr. Media page with this interview at the bottom, so you can go back and listen to that and buy his other books. Rick, pleasure to see you. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for joining us today on Mr. Media.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks very much again.
Hi, this is Buzz Burbank in the Buzz Burbank Newsroom, preparing for you another Buzz Burbank News and Comment. Do you like good stories? Boy, I sure do. I turn over a lot of stones each day to make sure I don't miss the best ones. Sure, some make me angry, and some make me sad, and some make me laugh, and isn't that what makes us human? I'm proud of the fact that I pack more news into my 10 or 15 minutes a day than the evening news does in a half hour. It's a free podcast at buzzburbank.com, or you can subscribe free at iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or get it on any RSS device. It's like a newspaper for your head. It's Buzz Burbank News and Comment, another Realm Network presentation. Weekday mornings right here on the Realm Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the George and Tony Entertainment Show. Prepare for awesome mediocrity.
We're the Cousin Oliver of the Realm Network. I'm George.
And I'm Tony.
And we're a weekly family-friendly podcast about pop culture.
From our point of view.
At realmnetwork.com, the George and Tony Entertainment Show from the Realm Network.
This is Snake. Do you read me, Otacon?
Loud and clear, Snake.
Did you listen to the latest episode of the Gaming Marathon on the Realm Network?
Of course. They really know their stuff about gaming, especially that Usad guy.
Yeah, but that Chirac guy is a real jerk. I don't like him.
Regardless, their reviews are spot on and they tell it like it is.
That's for sure.
What happened, Snake? Were you spotted?
Nah, it's just Lowell Meltzer crying about the O's again.
Close call.
I better continue the search for Metal Gear, but keep listening to the Gaming Marathon each week.
You got it, Snake.
New every Monday afternoon right here on the Realm Network.
It's the Mark and Lowell Show.
Hi, this is Mark. And this is Lowell. And if you're fans of Don and Mike, you may know who we are.
Our number one interns. You've met them on the show. They're the guys that ate all the junk, and they were outside with each other holding hands with a sign that said that they loved each other wearing the dunce caps.
And what you may not know is that we started out as fans back in their WAVA days.
Hi, Don and Mike. It's Mark and Lowell.
Oh, yeah. Hey, these are two guys that we once actually called them our proteges, didn't we?
And now we have our own show, so we want you to give it a shot. Just check us out at the Realm Network, realmnetwork.com, or you can go to markandlowell.com.
Resistance is futile. It's the Mark and Lowell Show.
Every Tuesday and Thursday evenings right here on the Realm Network. And catch the Poor Premium Show Friday nights.